It is a gray Tuesday morning in a quiet, silent kitchen. A man sits alone, staring intently at a yellow legal pad. On that pad is a list of numbers that won't add up. He rewrites them again and again, but the result stays the same. He is not in a crisis or facing an immediate catastrophe, but he realizes his financial life is just a series of lateral moves. He earns a decent wage and works 40 hours every week, yet his savings account balance has not changed in 3 years. This is the reality for millions of Americans who are doing everything they were told to do, but find themselves stuck in a cycle of maintenance rather than progress. There is a common belief held by almost everyone in this position that the solution to this stagnation is a matter of willpower or finding a secret optimization hack that will suddenly make the math work. People believe that if they could just try harder or find a more sophisticated way to track their spending, that the tide would turn. This belief is sticky because it places power in the individual's hands. While this feels empowering, it is ultimately a misunderstanding of money's function. The assumption is that savings is simply an act of withholding money. If you simply withhold enough, you will eventually build a surplus. However, for a middle-income earner, the truth is very different. The struggle is rarely about a lack of personal financial discipline. It is a mismatch between life structure and the sequence of actions. The idea that you can save your way out of a structural deficit by cutting small expenses is an illusion that ignores fixed costs. When rent or a mortgage takes up 40% of an income and transportation costs take another 20%, the remaining margin is too thin to absorb the shocks of real life. Dismantling the belief that more effort equals more savings is the first step toward clarity. It is not that effort is useless, but rather that effort applied to a broken sequence is wasted energy. The single saving rule that changes this dynamic is no tactic. It is a fundamental shift in the order of operations. Realize that saving is not just what is left over monthly. It is the first constraint placed upon your total income. This must happen before any debt or expense is considered. This requires a transition from abundance to a mindset of limits. In the current American economy, money is a strictly closed system. It is defined entirely by rigid trade-offs and difficult choices. If a person earns $5,000 a month and their fixed obligations total $4,500, they have a $500 margin. That margin is the only space where progress can happen, but it is also the space where life happens. When a tire needs replacing or a dental copay arises, that margin disappears. The structure of debt often dictates these outcomes more than any daily choice. Paying off a high-interest credit card is not an investment in the traditional sense, but it is the removal of a structural weight that makes future saving possible. You cannot build a floor while the foundation is still sinking. Many people try to invest in a retirement account while carrying debt. Specifically, carrying a balance on a card with 24% interest. This is a mathematical error disguised as a financial goal. The order of operations dictates that the debt must be cleared first. Avoiding 24% interest outweighs the speculative return of any market. Effort cannot override the physics of compound interest working against you. To look at a concrete example, consider a household earning $60,000. After taxes and basic necessities, they have $300 of discretionary income. If they use that money to improve their life through small luxuries, they remain at a net zero, stuck in the same financial cycle. If they instead commit that money to a liquid emergency fund, they are building a buffer that prevents any future high-interest debt. The trade-off between comfort and security is both immediate and tangible. It is the choice between the comfort of a slightly better lifestyle today and the security of not having to use a credit card when the water heater fails in 2 years. This is not about being cheap or deprivation. It is about recognizing that every dollar has a specific job within a sequence. If that $300 is not assigned to the job of protection, it will inevitably be consumed by the job of convenience. The usefulness of certain financial strategies depends entirely on the stage of life an individual is in. A person in their early 20s with minimal overhead can afford to be aggressive, but a person in their 50s with a family faces a different set of constraints. It is important to normalize that some strategies simply do not work for everyone. If you are currently struggling to cover the basics, generic advice is not helpful. Telling you to save 20% of your income is a source of shame. Progress is defined by moving from one stage to the next in correct order. The first stage is survival, where income exceeds expenses by any amount. The second stage is stability, where a small buffer exists to prevent debt. Only after these stages are secured can a person move into growth. Jumping to growth before securing stability is why many people feel failure. They are trying to run a race while their shoes are untied. In practice, people often behave in ways that seem irrational under pressure. Someone might spend money they don't have on a vacation from exhaustion. They are tired of a job that offers no perceived upward mobility. This is a behavioral pattern born of deep mental fatigue. Understanding why we spend is more important than the act itself. When the future feels uncertain or the path feels too long, the human brain seeks immediate relief through quick spending. This is why the rule of paying yourself first is effective. It removes the decision-making process from the moment of fatigue. By automating a small transfer the moment a paycheck hits, the individual is no longer negotiating with their own exhaustion. They have created a structural boundary outside of their daily willpower. This is not a motivational trick, but a behavioral guardrail. It is a strategy that acknowledges the reality of human imperfection. As income levels rise, the temptation is to expand your lifestyle. This is known as lifestyle creep, a common financial trap. Even those earning six figures can live paycheck to paycheck. The saving rule remains the same regardless of your income. Maintain a constant gap between what you earn and spend. That gap is the only place where true freedom lives. Without that gap, an individual is merely a pass-through entity for their creditors. They are working for the bank, the landlord, and the utility company. But they are not working for themselves, losing their own financial power. True financial clarity comes when you stop looking for a way to feel better. Instead, you must start looking at what the numbers actually are. It is a sobering process, but the only one leading to permanent change. The reality of building a stable life in a high-cost environment is that it takes much longer than the culture suggests. It is a slow and often boring process of making small choices that compound over decades. It requires a tolerance for delayed gratification and an acceptance of the fact that you will not see the results of your discipline for a long time. There is no urgency required, only consistency. When you stop treating money as an emotional barometer and start treating it as a tool with specific rules, the anxiety begins to lift. The relief does not come from having $1 million, but from knowing exactly where you stand and what the next logical step is. It is the transition from a state of wandering to a state of directed action. The one saving rule that changes everything for those who feel broke is the permanent transition from saving what is left over to spending what is left over after the future has been paid.